Okay, hi. This is just a really stupid video to make you guys feel better about how not hard it is to make one of these. I know it looks like it's super complicated, but it's really not. Dreamadev suggested that to get a back so that you don't have just a white back, that you print it out to kind of reverse the pattern and just print it out on the back. But unfortunately, you kind of need the bleed that you have on there. So I did cut it out so that print it out on the back so that you could do it, but it doesn't quite line up, because as seen by my cool sample that I started, but whatever. It's actually really is really easy. You can use either an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. It's up to you. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference in the end. The X-Acto blade that I started to use on this one, is apparently a size 3 blade. If you go out and buy an X-Acto blade, it'll come with a size 11, which is this one. That's totally fine. It doesn't matter really. I just was playing with X-Acto blades. The scissors that I used to make this one, or most of this one, are actually these giant-ass Fiskars things, because I lost my craft scissors years ago. So these are the best scissors I have. You should get good scissors, or try to use good scissors. You know, the worse the scissors, the more questionable the outcome of the flower. If you're going to use an X-Acto blade, it is easier if you start in the middle and go outwards, as opposed to if you're using scissors, it's actually easier to start from the outside and go in. In either case, be very careful as you get towards the center, because the bit that I gave you to bend over gets more and more fragile, and so it becomes more and more likely that things will just start to bend and tear. It's also more likely that you'll just start, you know, cutting through everything. So I printed this one out, and I haven't actually started it yet, so ooh, you get to see me start one. The easy part is just kind of really roughly chop it out of the square piece of paper, and I know that to a lot of you that's going to sound really basic, but you'd be surprised how many people just start to try to cut it out of a giant rectangle and really struggle. So even if you are going to use an X-Acto knife, do this first, because it'll just make it easier to move around. So yeah, and then just kind of start hacking away at it, really. It's not a big deal if you mess it up, because in the end, you're going to be twisting this around in a coil and taping the crap out of it. So it's not really huge. Because I'm starting with scissors, I'm doing this first. Something that will make your life easier if you have access to an X-Acto blade, but you are not particularly, even if you are not particularly confident with it, because of the way all these tiny edges come together, like in here, because of the way all those are, it gets really finicky, and it's really difficult to do with scissors. So if you have an X-Acto knife, boop, you can just take it, and along all those guidelines between each of the petals, just cut along those, so that then you don't have to worry about that. And when you and your glorious scissors get to that part, you don't have to actually cut that tiny bit, because it's only going to get tinier as you get in, like, further and further in. And that way the pieces will just they'll just kind of pop right back off, which is kind of nice. It's kind of whatever. So, boop. I am going to also post this with some visual instructions. This is just to kind of show you that, no, this isn't the end of the world, and to show you actually what I mean when I say some of the things that I say in my visual instructions. So yeah, be very careful when you're cutting around this part. I mean, obviously it's kind of the most delicate part to cut around. It's kind of the most annoying part of the flower. Thanks, guys. But it's not horrible. If you're using an X-Acto knife, which I will use on the next petal of this, which I will do on my other one that I was using an X-Acto knife on anyway, just be really careful about the way that you pull the paper, because the paper is not, you know, it's paper, it's going to tear. Especially if you're not going out of your way and buying like super fancy, super thick paper, it is going to tear, and that's an inevitable fact. So down in here, I mostly finished cutting out this one, Let's see if I can get that any closer, because this is horrible because it's just my laptop one. I start from down here and pull up around really awkwardly, and then I go and I pull to the tip of the one petal, but instead of pulling back, because if you pull back from that tip of the petal, you will tear the paper, I go to the middle of that little fork and I pull that way. And it's still going to be really awkward, and I still just tore that piece, so, you know, live and let live, and it doesn't really matter. Again, it's all going to be coiled up. You're making the effort, and the whole point of this is if you're going to mail them to Cartoon Network, you're mailing them to Cartoon Network, and they're going to end up with like a ton of these, or a ton of something similar. The nice thing about these is that it clearly evidences that you spent a lot of time on it, because it is tedious and it will take you time. I haven't timed exactly how long it takes me to cut one of these out with either scissors or an X-Acto knife, but because I have an X-Acto, even on this final prototype one, I did stop using scissors when I got to the super tiny ones and just used my X-Acto. But I would imagine that you could probably fudge those tiny bits, because the bleed color, the overlapping color, is the same as the outside of the petals. So if you just kind of generally cut that into a spiral, you should be fine. So, pulling that up. And then I have all of these bits that I've been doing kind of slowly. As I get tired of cutting out petals, I'll go through and I'll just slice, which I'll do now, so that I can just punch out all of those pieces. And so then I can punch that out, I can punch this out, I can punch this out, sort of. There we go, there we go, there we go. So yeah, so, you know, even though I tore the point of this one, the points of most of them are intact. And again, this will get really bendy and it will get kind of weak, which you can strengthen with your tape or whatever. This one, on the other hand, turned out really nice. So sometimes I luck out and sometimes I don't. I'm not very good at using an X-Acto knife. One of the other things that I'm going to talk about in my visual instructions is how to score the petals. What I mean is, you know how this one turned out, so that the petals are all nice and bendy and they kind of flatten out, like I can go like this and it crushes it and it makes it look all nice and kind of like it does in the show, versus my third prototype one, where I didn't score it, and I also didn't tape it very well, but I didn't score it, and so the petals don't really want to move. When I say score, I mean it means to very lightly cut the paper, because this is thicker cardstock. When I lightly cut the paper, it's not going to cut all the way through. So just kind of, when I say I score along the edge of each petal, what I mean is along this line, just kind of lightly take something and kind of almost cut it. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you could probably use a kitchen knife. I grew up in a really artsy craftsy house, so I've never been in a place where I didn't have the option of using arts and crafts materials. But as long as you're careful, I'm sure that you can use just a regular knife to do this. And it doesn't even need to be very exact, because once that line is there, even if it's kind of crooked or not quite there, it doesn't matter, because all of a sudden you have the ability to bend the leaf a lot easier. Versus on one that's not, it's just kind of annoying. I think that's all the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Again, I'm sorry that this is super awkward and super stupid. You can use whatever to do it. Just do it. When you tape it together, just add tape as needed. This thing is covered in tape, and you can't see quite how covered in tape it is because of my terrible webcam, but it is covered in tape. If you want to print out a back, like I did for this one that I'm going to try out and see how that goes, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It doesn't really affect the overall thing that, you know, you've spent a lot of time on cutting this out and taping it together and putting it in an envelope or in a box to mail to Cartoon Network with whatever you want to do to also support Young Justice, because this is all about saving our awesome DC Nation shows. So, have fun! Bye!